Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the murder in Inspector Stebbins' car. At 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, the doorbell went off like a conscience. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee, and Fritz hadn't even set the tray for Wolfe yet. I figured it was milk delivery or a lost soul, but when I opened the door and saw Pearlie Stebbins on the stoop, hat in hand and face the colour of brick dust, I knew something had crawled out of the city's gutter and chosen the wrong address. If Pearlie was blushing, I said, stepping aside, the city must have spun off its axis. He grunted, which in Stebbins' could mean anything from hello to homicide. Where's Wolfe? In bed, I told him, which at this hour puts him in the same category as most sensible mammals. Wake him, I whistled. Pearlie, I'd rather light matches in a gas leak. He shoved past me anyway, heavy shoes thudding on the rug. Fritz appeared from the dining room doorway, eyebrows performing a Swiss protest march. Mr. Stebbins, he began, but one glance at the cop's jawline convinced him this was a lost cause. By the time I caught up, Pearlie was in the office, standing before Wolfe's empty chair as if it were the bench at City Court. I pushed the bell cord, and from the upstairs elevator came the familiar whine of surrender. Wolfe emerged, wrapped in his yellow robe, eyes narrow slits of disapproval. "Archie," he said evenly, "you have invited chaos before breakfast." "Correction," I said. "Chaos invited itself." Stebbins didn't waste time. "There's a dead man in my squad car. Found him an hour ago outside a diner on Lenox Avenue. Engine running, doors locked from the outside." Wolfe's brows rose a quarter inch. "Your car?" "Mine, or was. I parked it outside my building last night. Keys in my pocket. When I came down, the thing's 2 miles away and there's a corpse in the back seat." That woke Wolfe up better than coffee. He lowered himself into his chair, robe folding like a tent around a general. "Describe." "Ralph Canning, political broker, fixer for City Hall contracts, known to every cop in Harlem and half the crooks. No wound, no blood. The ME says maybe chloroform. There's one of my cigars crushed under a tire and a cufflink missing off his wrist." Wolfe's eyes moved to me. "Pfui, a police officer's vehicle employed as a hearse, an abomination. Archie." "Yeah?" "You will go." I tried not to grin. It wasn't often he volunteered me before breakfast. "Harlem before noon? You sure the sun's up for that?" "Do not babble. Attend to what the scene reveals before it is contaminated by procedure." He turned back to Stebbins. "You are suspended, I presume." "Pending investigation." His voice cracked once, quickly repaired. "Kramer's chewing tacks. He don't think I—" "Spare me emotion," Wolfe said. "You are incapable of subtle deception. Therefore, someone has used you." For a second, Stebbins looked like he might salute. "If you can prove that—" "I prove nothing. I infer." Wolfe waved a hand. "Archie, go." The air outside tasted like old metal and fried onions. Dawn in Harlem has its own tempo. Street sweepers, bakery steam, and the echo of a trumpet trying to make rent. The diner on Lenox was cordoned off, and a crowd had gathered in that early morning curiosity peculiar to New Yorkers who should be asleep. I flashed my license and ducked under the tape. The squad car sat by the curb, motor cold now, a blue ghost with its dignity dented. Sergeant Purdy, one of Kramer's nightmen, eyed me. "Goodwin, tell your boss to keep out of this one." "I'd love to," I said. "He's allergic to corpses before lunch." Inside the car, the stiff looked surprisingly serene for a man who died in borrowed transportation. Ralph Canning had the face of a man accustomed to front-row seats, smooth cheeks, manicured nails, silk tie. The missing cufflink left a small pale oval on his wrist like a wink from the grave. No bruise, no cut, just that absence. The photographer finished his ritual clicking, and the ME muttered about no trauma. I leaned closer, noting a faint sweet odour under the gasoline. Chloroform, if Wolfe's hunch was right. On the pavement near the rear wheel, half buried in slush, lay a cigar stub, unlit, the kind Stebbins favoured, cheap and stubborn. I pocketed it carefully in wax paper for the lab boys. Same cheap, stubborn type Stebbins favours, which made it either a clue or an invitation to step in it. The diner owner, a narrow man with a towel like a surrender flag, insisted he'd seen the car pull up around 4. Engine running, nobody inside. I thought it was a plainclothes stakeout. He shrugged. Didn't look twice till the milkman screamed. Any strangers hanging around? He nodded toward a lanky kid wiping tables. That one says he saw a fella in uniform step out of the car and walk east. I crossed to the kid, who froze mid-wipe. Uniform like mine? I asked. Blue, yeah, but the pants were lighter, maybe a security guard. A red herring, probably, but worth noting. I gave him my card and told him not to vanish before lunch. As I turned back, Purdy called, "Goodwin, you're out of your depth." "Don't worry," I said. I brought water wings. By 9:30 I was back at West 35th Street. Wolfe was at his desk, arrayed like a Roman senator, dictating to himself. Fritz had cleared the breakfast dishes and the room smelled of coffee and furniture polish. I tossed my notebook onto the blotter. One dead politician, no wounds, no witnesses. Cigar near the tyre, cufflink missing, and one frightened diner owner who swears a uniform walked away. Wolfe opened his eyes. Uniform? Could be anyone from a cop to a bus conductor. He grunted. Unsatisfactory. The cufflink? Gold, monogrammed RC according to his wife. The other one still on him. That is deliberate. A symbol. He closed his eyes again, fingers steepled. Mr. Canning was a creature of favours. Symbols matter in such trades. Favours meaning politics? Meaning barter in reputation, he said. The same commodity in which policemen traffic, whether they admit it or not. That's poetic for you before beer. He ignored me. You perceive the irony? Mr. Stebbins' name sullied, his instrument of duty employed as a murder coach. A man's profession is his armour. Strip it, and you expose his shame. Beautiful, I said. Want me to embroider it for the Gazette? Archie. His tone stopped me mid-grin. You will refrain from wit until we have data. Too late, I said, but took the hint. Wolfe reached for the phone. Operator, connect me to Inspector Kramer. When the line clicked through, his voice cooled another 10 degrees. Good morning, Inspector. Yes, I am aware. Mr. Goodwin has inspected the scene. No, I do not intend to interfere. However, if you desire the integrity of your department preserved, I suggest discretion. Even from across the desk, I could hear Kramer's gravel through the receiver. Wolfe listened, eyes half closed, then murmured, Indeed. Then we are allies, however briefly. Good day. He replaced the handset and sighed. The city's appetite for scandal is voracious. If Stebbins is innocent, he will be devoured before noon. I leaned back. And if he's guilty? Then the world loses nothing of consequence. He reached for a brown folder. However, your description of the odour intrigues me. Chloroform implies access to medical supplies, police evidence storage, hospitals or laboratories. We shall begin there. We, meaning me? Obviously. I am not ambulatory. I stood. Want me to pick up a sandwich while I'm at it? He frowned. Food before noon is for infants. Then I'll take milk, I said, heading for the door. Archie. I stopped. Be cautious. Whoever contrived this aims at the police as an institution. Such men are reckless. For Wolfe, that was almost tender. Don't worry, I said. If anyone chloroforms me, make sure they use the expensive kind. He sniffed. Imbecile. But when I left, he was staring at the crushed cigar stub I'd placed on his blotter, eyes gleaming like a cat scenting a riddle. Fritz appeared in the doorway with the breakfast tray. Will Mr. Wolfe dine now? Feed him, I said. He's got thinking to do. And as I went out into the bright, cold street, the case already smelled of politics, panic, and something else, reputation gone rancid. Wolfe would call it corruption. I called it Tuesday in New York. At 10 minutes to 10, Wolfe was in his chair, swaddled in yellow like a chrysalis with opinions, and I was typing up my notes from the Harlem jaunt. The sun came through the Venetian blinds in obedient stripes, and Fritz's coffee had reached that rare state between divine and dangerous. All was serene, until the front doorbell exploded like a tax audit. I didn't have to look to know who it was. There's a rhythm to Inspector Kramer's ring that suggests subpoena by brute force. Fritz materialized in the office doorway, immaculate as ever, one eyebrow raised in continental tragedy. "Mr. Kramer," he announced with all the resignation of a man introducing a hurricane. Kramer stomped in, cigar blazing and temper one puff short of ignition. His fedora was clamped under his arm, his overcoat open, and the smell of the outside world, cold air and impatience followed him like an escort. "Wolfe," he barked, "what's this I hear about your man nosing around a police car murder?" Wolfe's eyes didn't move. "Good morning, Inspector." "That's not an answer." "It is a courtesy," Wolfe said. He gestured toward the red chair with one finger, as if inviting a bear to tea. Kramer ignored it. "You've got no business meddling in this one. It's departmental and Stebbins is already up to his neck." I leaned back in my chair. "Up to his neck? He's lucky to have one left. The papers will be feeding on him by noon." Kramer swung toward me. "You think this is funny, Goodwin?" "Not funny. Tragic. Like Hamlet, but with cigars." "Archie," Wolfe murmured, "spare us Shakespeare before lunch." Kramer's growl deepened. "I don't know what kind of game you two are playing, but I'll tell you this. If Wolfe's pulling strings to make Stebbins look innocent, I'll—" "Stop," Wolfe said softly. The word landed like a gavel. "You insult both of us. I have not meddled, and Mr. Goodwin is incapable of subtle conspiracy before coffee." That stung slightly, though I chose to interpret it as flattery. Kramer blew smoke toward the ceiling fan. "Then explain why Stebbins shows up here at dawn like a lost puppy." "Because," Wolfe said, "he is under duress and trusts neither his superiors nor the press. He wanted counsel, not complicity." "Counsel? You're not his lawyer." "No," Wolfe said, "but I am capable of reasoning, which is more than can be said for most lawyers." That earned me a quiet grin I tried to hide behind the coffee cup. Kramer jammed his cigar between his teeth and paced. "The department's catching hell. A cop's car used as a hearse. Hell, the Gazette's already calling it the squad car killing. Every crook in the city's laughing at us." He stopped, fists on hips. "If Stebbins did it, I'll nail him myself. But if he didn't, I can't prove it till the lab finishes." Wolfe's brows arched. "Ah, so the mighty inspector seeks assistance." Kramer glared. "Don't flatter yourself." "Then enlighten me. Why bring your smoke and thunder to my threshold?" He hesitated, then spat it out. "Because your boy's been asking questions uptown, and because I need this wrapped before the papers crucify the department." Wolfe nodded once. "And the lab?" "They found something," Kramer muttered. "Trace of chloroform in the back upholstery, no idea how it got there." That did it. Wolfe's nostrils flared like a sommelier at a bad vintage. "Chloroform. So Mr. Canning was subdued elsewhere and transported. Elementary. And you are blind to the symbolism. Using Stebbins's car. It's deliberate mockery." Kramer stabbed his cigar at him. "Then prove it." "I prove nothing," Wolfe said. "Proof is the province of juries. I deduce." "Then deduce fast," Kramer snapped, "and stay out of my way while you do it." He jammed his hat on, leaving a smoke trail thick enough to stain the drapes, and marched out without another word. The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as tension concentrate. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed, fingertips together. "Chloroform," he murmured. "The coward's anesthetic." "You think Kramer came just to brag about lab reports?" I asked. He opened one eye. "He came to ask without asking. He is too proud to beg." "Then what now?" "Now," he said, "we await the inevitable." He didn't have to wait long. The phone rang less than 15 minutes later. "Goodwin speaking," I said. "Archie, it's Pearlie." His voice was raw like a file scraping metal. "They've suspended me. Badge, gun, everything. Kramer's trying to hold off the press, but they're saying I killed him." I swiveled to Wolfe. "You were right. He's been hung without a rope. Put him through." I handed over the receiver. Wolfe adjusted it delicately, as though telephones might bruise him. "Mr. Stebbins," he said, "contain yourself. Emotion impedes thought." Pearlie's voice cracked. "They're saying I was drunk, that I drove my car to Harlem and passed out. I wasn't anywhere near that place. You gotta help me, Wolfe. I'll pay you whatever." Wolfe's eyelids lowered like theatre curtains. "Indeed. Payment clarifies everything. Name it. I'll find it. $10,000. There was a long silence, then a gasp. 10? Are you crazy? I don't have that kind of borrow, mortgage, or solicit, Wolfe said. It must come from you personally. I will not be employed by an institution. My fee is both compensation and guarantee of candour. I nearly choked on my coffee. Pearly paying Wolfe, I muttered, is like a bull hiring a matador. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me, tolerant but sharp. Mr. Goodwin, refrain. On the other end, Stebbins swallowed hard. All right, you'll get it. I'll get it. Just don't let them ruin me. Good. We are engaged. Wolfe hung up and exhaled through his nose, a sound halfway between satisfaction and pity. That, he said, was unpleasant. Not the word I'd pick. You just fleeced a cop on suspension. I required sincerity. Money ensures sincerity. Sure, I said, and beer ensures philosophy. He ignored me, reaching for the bell cord. Fritz! Fritz appeared within moments, precise as a Swiss clock. Yes, sir. Bring coffee for Mr. Goodwin. His sarcasm needs fortification. Fritz departed without comment, and Wolfe turned to me again. You disapprove? I'm torn, I said. Half of me applauds, half wants to send Pearly a sympathy card. You are sentimental, Wolfe said, a dangerous flaw in a detective. Maybe, but you've got a soft spot too, otherwise you'd have thrown him out. He sighed. Perhaps. Stebbins is crude but loyal. He has the misfortune of decency in a vocation that rewards pliability. That offends me. I whistled low. A new motive. Moral outrage. Don't mock virtue, he said. It is rare enough. The phone rang again, and I beat him to it. Brownstone? Goodwin speaking. Kramer, came the growl. Tell Wolfe he's got 24 hours. If he's taking Stebbins' money, he'd better deliver something I can use. I relayed the message. Wolfe nodded once. Tell him, he said. I never accept payment without intention. I did, and Kramer just grunted. Fine, but if this blows up, I'm holding you both in it. The line went dead. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed again. Mr. Kramer's courtesy improves. Like arsenic in small doses. Archie, cease commentary and fetch the morning paper. I wish to know what the rabble believes before I correct them. As I rose, he added, and arrange for Saul Panzer to come at 3. We will require discretion. Saul? Then it's official. It has been official since Mr. Stebbins debased himself to honesty. Fritz reappeared with the tray, silver gleaming. Wolfe inhaled the aroma, satisfied. Archie, he said, settling back with his cup. We embark on an unpleasant business. Be precise, be cautious, and above all, be witty, I offered. He sighed. Be silent, if possible. That naturally was impossible, but as the morning light hit the yellow leather of his chair and smoke curled in slow hieroglyphs above his head, I knew the city had just gained another headline, and Wolfe, another victim to exonerate. Grief may be a private thing, but Mrs. Ralph Canning had turned hers into a stage production. When I walked into the penthouse at 2:15, the curtains were drawn, the lights were low, and the air smelled of lilacs and calculation. She was sitting on a cream chaise in a black lace dress that could have made the angels nervous, and I figured if she'd shed any tears they'd been wiped off with cold cream and a mirror. She wore grief like a new fur, I decided aloud. Expensive but not broken in. She looked up sharply. You're from the police? Not quite. I'm the civilian model, Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe. That name hit like a fly in her perfume bottle. Her eyes, dark and polished as piano keys, narrowed. I didn't send for him. Your husband's death sent for him, I said. You can protest later. For now, I'm here to ask who might have hated Ralph enough to tuck him in for good. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. Hate? Mr. Goodwin, my husband was in politics. Everyone hated him. That was his art. I took a seat uninvited. The couch gave off a sigh of mink. Let's start small. Business rivals, lovers, unpaid debts, anything that rattles. She rose, crossed to a cigarette box the size of a jewellery chest, and lit one with the patience of a stage queue. There were whispers, of course, she said through smoke. Contracts, favours. He knew secrets. But names? No. The only man fool enough to threaten Ralph was Ralph himself. Meaning? He never knew when to stop collecting favours. She exhaled and looked at me through the haze. You think one of your precious policemen killed him, don't you? That theory's out for a walk, I said, but it hasn't found a leash yet. That earned me a flicker of amusement. Then it died. She turned back to her dressing table. You'll forgive me if I don't list his enemies alphabetically. Sure, I said, but maybe one name will volunteer if I mention another. Stebbins. The reaction was quick, too quick. Her cigarette trembled just enough to betray her nerves. Stebbins? She echoed. The officer whose car... Yes, I read that. Why would Ralph be in his car? That's what we're trying to find out. For a long moment, she stared at her own reflection. Then she said, There was someone else, Harold Pyle, City Hall liaison. He and Ralph were supposed to share a contract for publicity until Ralph cut him out. They stopped speaking 6 months ago. Publicity, I said. That's politics with a perfume sprayer. She smiled faintly. Harold thought himself untouchable. Ralph liked to remind him otherwise. If you want a man who hated my husband enough, Pyle's your hound. She turned away again, signalling dismissal, and I took the cue. As I reached the door, she said softly, Mr. Goodwin. I looked back. If you find whoever did this, tell him. She paused, lips curling in something that wasn't sorrow. Tell him I'd have paid double. Outside, the sunlight looked indecent after that room. I grabbed a cab downtown, replaying her tone. A widow with a motive is as common as a donut, but that one could have furnished an entire bakery. Harold Pyle was holding court in a midtown bar called the Federal Tap, the kind of place where the martinis came in threes and the wallpaper came in smoke. It was 3 o'clock, the witching hour for men who don't want to be seen working. He spotted me before I reached the stool. Thin, nervous type, with a politician's smile and a gambler's eyes. His collar was losing a wrestling match with his necktie, and he was sweating like the rent was due. Goodwin, isn't it? He said. I've seen you around, Wolfe's man. That's me, I said, sliding onto the stool beside him. And you're Harold Pyle, the late Ralph Canning's business partner, or ex-partner. He flinched at late. I had nothing to do with that mess. I didn't accuse you, yet. I signalled the bartender. 2 gingers. He blinked. Ginger ale? I like to stay vertical during conversations. He swallowed his gin instead. You wouldn't understand. Ralph was complicated. He knew things. He liked having leverage. Leverage over whom? His gaze flicked toward the mirror behind the bar, then back. He was blackmailing someone. Maybe a cop, I don't know the name. That's convenient. It's the truth. His hand shook as he reached for his drink. He showed me papers once, said he could ruin a man in uniform. He was laughing when he said it. Ralph Canning didn't laugh unless someone else was about to cry, I said. Where are those papers now? He set the glass down too hard. If I knew, I'd burn them. There was something genuine in that, and also something rehearsed. I was about to push further when the bartender, a big man with the calm of a saint and the face of a retired boxer, drifted over to refill Pyle's glass. As he did, he slipped something onto the bar in front of me, casual as a coin. A matchbook, black silver lettering, the Silver Derby Club. I pocketed it without blinking. Much obliged, I said, handing him a tip that bought silence. When I turned back, Pyle was watching. You looking for a handout? He said. Just change, I said. You never know when a man might need a light. He scowled. You're wasting your time, Goodwin. Whatever Canning did, it died with him. Maybe, I said, finishing my drink. But I've got a habit of digging up things that prefer to stay buried. That got me the look of a man trying to decide whether to fight or flee. I spared him the trouble by leaving. By the time I hit the street, the afternoon had that warm, lazy glare that makes the city look honest for 5 minutes. I flipped open the matchbook as I walked. Inside were 3 names, neatly penciled. Canning, Pyle, Halloran. Halloran, Deputy Commissioner Halloran, no less. The kind of company that doesn't belong on cigarette paper. I hailed a cab back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, a book open and his patience sealed. The clock showed 4 minutes to 4, dangerous territory, given the sacred orchid hours that began at exactly 4. Archie, he said without looking up, if you intend to disturb me, do so efficiently. I'll be brief, I said. Canning's widow's in fine form, draped in venom and lace. She fingered Harold Pyle, a City Hall publicity man with more sweat than soul. He hinted Canning was blackmailing a cop. I picked up a souvenir. I placed the matchbook on his blotter. He regarded it as though it might explode. "The Silver Derby Club," he murmured. "A gambling establishment of middling repute. Why would Canning and a police official share such a trinket?" "That's the puzzle. Maybe they traded losses." He gave me a thin smile. "Or immunity. Also, the bartender slipped it to me like a favour. Maybe he wanted me to notice." "Possibly," Wolfe said. "Or possibly he wanted to distract you. That is the danger of gratuities. They tend to arrive poisoned." "Then I'll charge it to the expense account as attempted murder." He shut the book. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "You will return to that club this evening, but not before 8. I want details. Ownership, clientele, access. Avoid dramatics." "I'm always subtle," he sighed. "That is a falsehood, but a tolerable one. Commendable work. Try not to be shot." I grinned. "That's practically affection." He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz, the orchids." As the elevator whirred above and the smell of earth and pollen began drifting down, I pocketed the matchbook again. The Silver Derby's name glinted under the lamplight like a dare. Wolfe had retreated into his flowers, the way saints retreat into prayer. I closed my notebook, tipped my hat to Fritz as he entered with Wolfe's watering can, and headed out. Somewhere between politics, perfume, and cheap liquor, Ralph Canning had found the wrong secret to sell, and someone in uniform had made sure the receipt was permanent. If Manhattan ever built a temple to hypocrisy, the Silver Derby was its altar. From the sidewalk it looked like a supper club, gold canopy, red carpet, doorman with a chin like an iron, and a smile borrowed from the treasury. Inside, the air glittered with money pretending to behave. The orchestra crooned something expensive, and every table held a man in a tux who'd sold a small virtue to get there. I told the maitre d' I was Archie Goodwin, freelance columnist, which is true, in the same way that a shark is a freelance swimmer. He raised an eyebrow but led me to a table anyway. My plan was simple: order a ginger ale, spot Verna Dale, and see whether her smile was for sale or standard issue. Verna arrived before the drink. Platinum hair, silver gown, and a perfume that could have explained the national debt. She slid into the seat opposite as if I'd requested her by model number. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice like champagne poured through smoke. "We don't get columnists here. Are you reviewing the lamb chops or the clientele?" "Neither," I said. "I'm tracing a name, Ralph Canning. He used to dine here, maybe lose a few hands." Her eyes said welcome, but her purse said don't ask questions. "Canning," she repeated, rolling the syllables. "Yes, I remember him. Charming, in a rough way. He hasn't been in lately." "That's one way to phrase death," I said. The smile didn't slip, but the pupils tightened. "Dead? How dreadful. Was it sudden?" "More sudden than he expected," I told her. "In a squad car, of all things." She reached for her cigarette case, giving herself a beat. "Then I suppose you're here to gossip on behalf of the Gazette." "I'm here for Nero Wolfe," I said. "He's got more weight than the Gazette." That one landed. Her fingers froze for half a second before she laughed lightly. "Mr. Wolfe, the detective. Well, that explains your charm." "Charm's the only part of me that works overtime." She leaned in close, smoke curling between us. "If you're asking about Canning, you'll only find ghosts. This isn't a gambling club, you know." "Of course not," I said. "And I'm a vegetarian." Her laughter turned brittle. "You should leave before curiosity becomes contagious." That was the point where Saul Pantzer, materializing from nowhere in his usual hat and invisibility cloak, drifted by toward the corridor behind the stage. I caught his glance, our prearranged cue, and decided Verna's company was worth about another 20 seconds. "I'll take your advice," I said, standing. "You're too nice to lie so efficiently." She rose too, eyes narrowing. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Goodwin. Some people here don't enjoy questions." "I've noticed," I said. "They don't tip either." As I moved toward the corridor, one of those unamused people, a waiter built like a refrigerator, shifted to intercept. I smiled. "Restroom," I said. He looked unconvinced but stepped aside. Behind the drape the noise dimmed to a hum. A hallway stretched to a half-open door, light spilling out. Inside, Saul was crouched at a desk the size of a piano, riffling papers with the delicate precision of a pickpocket reading scripture. "Busy evening?" I asked quietly. He nodded once, eyes on a ledger bound in green leather. Accounts, payments, initials, amounts. No names, just badge numbers. He pointed to one entry marked B17. Canning's code, maybe. Page missing between this and the next series. I whistled under my breath, and I thought poker debts were messy. Saul glanced up. We should move. Someone's coming. He wasn't wrong. High heels clicked down the corridor like typewriter keys spelling trouble. I ducked behind the file cabinet while Saul closed the book and faded toward the side door. Verna entered, alone, the switchblade smile back in place. Well, she said, a columnist with a curiosity for bookkeeping. That's new. Journalistic integrity, I said. I like to fact-check my dinner bill. She crossed to the desk, her perfume announcing victory. Mr. Goodwin, if I told you these books are private, would that satisfy you? Only if you sign the confession. She laughed again, but softer now. You're playing a dangerous game. Then I hope the house odds are good, I said, stepping out from behind the cabinet. Tell me, Miss Dale, does B17 ring any bells? Her eyes flickered, a reflex she couldn't suppress. It's meaningless. A table number, perhaps. Maybe, I said, but I don't think tables make disbursements. She moved closer, slow and deliberate, until the scent nearly erased rational thought. Why don't you let this go, Mr. Goodwin? There are easier ways to make a living. Mr. Canning learned that too late. I smiled. And you learned from him? For a second she looked like she might scratch, then she turned on her heel. Enjoy your evening. When she was gone, Saul slipped back in from the side door. She didn't see me. She saw enough, I said. We've got a missing page and a hostess who blinks at B17. That's progress. Want the book? He asked. Leave it. The cops will get apoplexy if we smudge their evidence. I'll take a note. I jotted the details in my pad, then followed Saul out the back into the alley, where the city's glamour turned back into soot. By 10 that night I was home at the brownstone, giving Wolfe the recital. He sat in his chair under the globe lamp, eyes half closed, lips compressed into that line that meant the neurons were waltzing. I finished with, Verna Dale, blonde, dangerous and allergic to questions. One ledger with payments to badge numbers, one missing page marked between B16 and B18, and one bartender who probably carries a blackjack in his apron. Silence, the kind that might earn rent if bottled. Then Wolfe said, Women are admirable only in orchids, never in evidence. That's unkind, I said. She was helpful in a misleading sort of way. Precisely, he replied. She served her function to reveal the existence of deceit while concealing its direction. The missing page, Mr. Goodwin, is a confession by omission. Meaning someone tore out their own entry. Or someone else's, he murmured. You will find which. Tomorrow. He reached for the bell cord. Fritz, the beer. As I pulled the blinds and the city light folded itself outside, Wolfe raised the glass to his lips with the air of a man sealing a chapter. I said, If Verna Dale's running that club, she's mixed up in more than tips. He nodded once. No doubt. The masquerade of respectability always requires dancers. And someone, Archie, is about to fall out of step. That sounded like the start of trouble, which, around our household, meant business was about to get good. At 3:45 the next afternoon, the brownstone doorbell gave a ring that sounded like typewriter keys dipped in ambition. I knew that sound. Only one man in New York could make a summons feel like a headline. Lon Cohen of the Gazette, the paper's conscience, gossip sheet, and opportunist rolled into one. I let him in, because Wolfe would rather face the Inquisition than a newspaper man uninvited. Lon came in wearing a grey suit with ink smudges on the cuff and the grin of a man who's about to ruin someone's morning. Archie, he said, I bring good tidings for circulation, bad for your client. You tell Wolfe the Gazette's running a splash tomorrow. Sergeant Stebbins in City Hall payoff ring. Big letters, page 1. Lovely, I said. That'll pair nicely with the crossword. He chuckled, but his eyes were sharp. Canning's murder has the department in a panic. The boys upstairs are whispering that Stebbins moonlighted for Canning's political errands. Your boss must have sniffed something early, since he's always 3 steps ahead of scandal. Only 3, I said. He's slowing down. Wolfe's voice floated from the office. Send Mr. Cohen in before you debase wit entirely. Lon obeyed, hat in hand, like a man entering court. Wolfe sat behind the desk, fingers steepled, expression carved from marble. The afternoon sun made the yellow leather of his chair glow like imperial judgment. "Mr. Cohen," Wolfe said, "you are as punctual as misfortune." Lon grinned. "I try, sir. The story's already set in type, but I thought fairness required a courtesy call." "Fairness?" Wolfe arched a brow. "A novel practice in journalism." Lon shrugged. "It sells better than libel suits. You've got a quote?" Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, the way he might before reciting a prayer. "No. The case you refer to is under independent review. You may print that precisely as phrased." Lon blinked. "That's it?" "That suffices. Truth, like beer, requires restraint in pouring." "Speaking of beer," I said, "this might qualify as thirst-inducing." Wolfe tugged the bell cord. Fritz the chilled glass. Then to me, "If I am to defend integrity, I must first hydrate." Lon laughed. "That's a headline by itself." When Fritz entered, immaculate and silent, Wolfe accepted the glass with the ceremony of a bishop taking communion. "Mr. Cohen, your article will injure a decent man's name and gratify the ignorant. You may justify it as commerce. I, however, will not assist you." Lon's grin faded. "We're not painting him guilty, Wolfe. We're connecting dots already public. Canning's fundraiser photos, for instance. One picture has Stebbins in the background." That got Wolfe's eyes open again. "Indeed." Lon handed me the paper proof. I spread it across the desk. In the corner of the glossy shot, Canning raising a glass amid a flock of donors, stood Verna Dale, unmistakable, half-turned toward the camera. Just behind her, blurred but distinct, a man in uniform. I said, "If that's Stebbins, I'm the Prince of Wales. Look at the cap badge. Private security, not police." Lon peered closer, frowned, and then shrugged. "Maybe, but the caption's already set." Wolfe's voice dropped, soft but heavy. "Then, Mr. Cohen, you will print also that the photograph is unverified, and the matter under review. Exact wording." "That's not how we—" "It will be," Wolfe said. "You came for courtesy. You shall receive precision. If you omit that line, I shall speak to your editor directly. He is less impervious to reason." Lon sighed, defeated but smiling. "All right, you win, as usual. You'll have your line, but if this blows wider, don't pretend you don't enjoy the fireworks." "I detest fireworks," Wolfe said. "They waste powder and disturb orchids." That was the dismissal, and Lon knew it. He pocketed the proof and tipped his hat. "Good day, gentlemen. Archie, next time you want a leak, call me first." "Sure," I said. "You'll be the first to know nothing." When the door closed behind him, Wolfe drank half the glass in one slow pull. "Archie," he said, "telephone Inspector Kramer." I dialed. The voice that came through was pure volcanic gravel. "Goodwin, what's this about the Gazette? They're plastering Stebbins' face across the city." "Yeah," I said. "They're calling it a corruption network. You might buy an extra copy for scrapbooks." "Damn it. Put Wolfe on." I handed over the receiver. Wolfe listened, murmured once or twice, then said, "No, Inspector, I have not interfered. When Mr. Stebbins fulfills his obligation, I shall act. Until then, contain your fury. It impedes digestion." He hung up. I leaned on the desk. "That was merciful of you." "He is overwrought," Wolfe said. "The spectacle of his department's entrails displayed in print unsettles him." "Same for Pearlie, I bet." "Mr. Stebbins," Wolfe said firmly, "will endure. Reputation, like wine, must sometimes ferment before it clears." I grinned. Nothing like a front-page smear to bring out Wolfe's appetite for justice, and cold beer. He glared faintly but didn't argue. Outside, the city was beginning its evening racket. Horns, footsteps, the clatter of newsboys rehearsing tomorrow's outrage. Inside, Wolfe sat motionless, the sunlight fading from his desk, the glass half empty, and the air thick with unspoken deduction. By the next morning, the Gazette hit the stands. Stebbins' suspension was official, the photograph splashed across the page, and one sentence buried in the column's third paragraph: "The case is under independent review." That line, and Wolfe's beer, were the only two things in the city still served cold. At 11 o'clock that night, when the city outside had finally stopped pretending to be quiet, someone banged on the brownstone door like a cop with bad news. Fritz never answers after 10, so it was my privilege to find Pearlie Stebbins on the stoop, hat low, collar up, face carved out of desperation. "Evening," I said. "If you're here for confession, Father Wolfe's retired for the night." He pushed past me. "Cut it, Goodwin. I need him." I followed him into the office, closing the door before Fritz could appear in protest. Wolfe was at his desk, reading, the lamp throwing a pool of amber around him like a judge caught between mercy and indigestion. He didn't look up until Pearlie planted both fists on the edge of the desk. "Wolfe," he said, "they're fixing me for good. I've been suspended. Kramer's doing what he can, but the brass wants my badge on a plate." Wolfe set the book aside and folded his hands. "Mr. Stebbins, I admire punctual despair, but not disorder. Sit." Pearlie didn't. "Canning came to me 2 months ago," he said. "Wanted me to make an arrest disappear. A numbers runner, he used to handle city cash. I told him to go to hell. Next thing I know, someone uses my name on the paperwork. Now the department thinks I was on his payroll." "Your refusal then was noted and weaponized," Wolfe said. "Yeah, I'm being framed with my own damn honesty." His voice cracked. "You gotta believe me." I'd seen Pearlie yell, snarl, and threaten to break ribs, but watching him plead was like watching a gorilla ask for ballet shoes. Impressive in theory, heartbreaking in practice. Wolfe leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I do believe you. Your sincerity is artless but genuine. Continue." Pearlie sagged into the red chair, rubbing his hands together. Canning's fixer crowd had connections at City Hall. If one of them had access to the personnel files, they could forge the authorizations easy. But I can't prove who. "Indeed." Wolfe's tone was silk over steel. "You are an officer of some experience, Mr. Stebbins. You know that guilt is rarely the obstacle. Proof is." Pearlie scowled. "I didn't come for philosophy. I came for help." "And you have it," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, sir?" "Retrieve the notebook." I grabbed my pad from the desk corner. Wolfe dictated slowly, voice deliberate. "You will compile a list of every police officer who attended Mr. Canning's charity dinner 3 weeks ago, the one at the Waldorf." Stebbins blinked. "How do you know about that?" "Because corruption prefers tuxedos to alleys," Wolfe said. "If a man sought to implicate you, he would select those already complicit." I jotted as he spoke. "That's a tall order, boss. Those lists aren't exactly public." "You have friends in the press, Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said. "Use them discreetly." "Lon Cohen owes me a steak," I said. "He can start paying." Pearlie stood. "Wolfe, I'll find that list myself if I have to." "No," Wolfe said sharply. "You will do nothing. Any movement from you will confirm their suspicions. Let Mr. Goodwin ferret. He was bred for it." That earned me a sideways grin. Nice to be appreciated. Wolfe ignored me. "Mr. Stebbins, go home. Sleep if you can. Appear neither frightened nor defiant tomorrow. Guilt's twin is panic." Pearlie hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but if this backfires—" "It will not," Wolfe said. "The men who contrive such falsehoods always overreach. When they do, I shall pluck them by their arrogance." As Pearlie left, Wolfe exhaled, long and slow. "A brave man," he murmured, "but not a clever one. Integrity without guile is armor made of glass." I shut my notebook. "You defending a cop now? What's next? You and Kramer singing duets?" Wolfe's lips twitched. "Do not be absurd. Mr. Stebbins is crude, but he is honest. That is a rarity worth preservation." He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz, beer." And as the chilled glass arrived, Wolfe raised it like a verdict. "To loyalty under siege," he said. I grinned. "I'll drink to that. But if he's innocent, someone out there's guilty, and they're not sleeping tonight." At 10:15 that night, the brownstone smelled of roast pheasant and unfinished business. Wolfe was in his chair, hands tented, eyes half closed. Not asleep, just pretending civilization hadn't gone mad outside. I was finishing the day's notes when the bell rang, sharp and short, the kind Saul Panzer uses when he doesn't want to startle orchids or clients. I opened the door and let him in. Saul looked like always. Neat hat, quiet shoes, eyes that had already seen the inside of a dozen people's lies. He nodded once. "Got something for you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope, the kind banks use to transport bad news. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a single sheet of green ledger paper. "Where'd you find it?" I asked. "Glove box of Verna Dale's car," he said. "Tucked behind the registration. She must have missed it when she cleaned out." Or left it there for sentimental reasons, I said. What's on it? He gave a small shrug. Codes, figures, the same style as the other ledger pages you mentioned. One line reads B17RC. Amount column says 5,000 even. RC as in Ralph Canning? Your guess is better than mine, Saul said. But if this is the missing page, it's what somebody killed to hide. That was enough to wake the mountain. Wolfe's voice came from behind me. Bring it here. Saul followed me into the office where Wolfe already had the blotter cleared. The overhead lamp threw light like an interrogation. He spread the page flat with careful fingers, as if it were a rare manuscript instead of a confession in shorthand. The missing leaf, he murmured. And you are certain it was concealed in Miss Dale's vehicle? Positive, Saul said. I had to jimmy the latch. Nobody else could have planted it since the car's been in impound. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Sit, if you please. Saul didn't. He never does. I took my usual perch near the desk corner, because someone had to translate between human and philosopher. Wolfe studied the sheet through his reading glass. He said, column headings in the same hand as the previous pages, but this line, B17, has been written by another. Another what? Accountant? I asked. Another person, Wolfe said patiently. Observe the downward stroke of the B, heavier, deliberate. The forger attempted imitation but lacked fluency. Saul said, so someone faked a record for Canning. More precisely, Wolfe corrected, someone wished it to appear that Canning made disbursements to B17. Which is a badge number, I said. Stebbins' number starts with B22, so this one's close enough to throw suspicion his way. Wolfe grunted. Ingenious but crude. Forgery seldom achieves subtlety. I bent over the page, sniffing out habit. A faint smell, floral, like perfume and printer's ink, tickled the air. Then I saw it. A streak at the corner, no bigger than a comma, faintly purple. Violet ink, I said, classy enough to frame a saint. Wolfe turned his head. Explain. Verna Dale's pen, I said. She signed the club receipts with it. Violet ink, same tint. You can see the smudge here at the margin. My guess is she handled it, maybe added something, maybe didn't know what she was touching. Saul frowned. If she forged it, why keep it? Maybe she thought she'd need leverage later, I said. Blackmail's like poker. You don't fold your best card. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. No, Miss Dale lacked courage for extortion. She was an instrument, not an engineer. Saul's jaw tightened. Then who's the engineer? That, Wolfe said, depends upon who benefits most from Stebbins' ruin. You, Archie. Call Mr. Kramer. Request the full roster of police attendees at Canning's charity gala. At this hour? Justice does not observe bedtime, Wolfe said. I dialed. The line took 3 rings before Kramer's gravel came through. Yeah, what is it, Goodwin? Evening, Inspector. Wolfe wants a list of every officer who showed up at Canning's Waldorf dinner 3 weeks back. Silence, then a sigh like steam. What for? For truth, beauty, and the American way, I said. Also for the small matter of clearing your suspended sergeant. Phooey, Wolfe muttered from across the desk. Kramer growled. Tell Wolfe he'll get it when the sun rises, not before, and keep your nose out of the evidence room. Copy that, I said, and hung up. Tomorrow morning, I told Wolfe. Kramer's a sweetheart when he's obstructing justice. Wolfe ignored the remark. Saul, return at 10 with a photostat of this page. I require no mishandling. Archie, record the ink observation in your notes. I opened my pad and wrote it down, though I already knew it by heart. Violet ink, feminine, perfume undertone, possibly applied after forgery. Saul slipped his hands into his pockets. You think Verna knew she was being used? She knew enough to die for it, Wolfe said coldly. That is sufficient knowledge for any mortal. That shut the room up for a minute. The clock ticked toward 10:15. Saul gave a nod and left the envelope on Wolfe's desk. When the door closed, the silence was heavier than before. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half-lidded. Forgery, Mr. Goodwin, is a confession by imitation. It reveals not only deceit but admiration. The culprit admired Stebbins enough to steal his identity. That irony will please him little when exposed. Then we're close, I said. We've got motive, handwriting, and enough violet ink to dye the Hudson. He permitted a thin smile. Your faculties occasionally rise above the pedestrian. Coming from you, I said, that's practically a love letter. He frowned, but not seriously. Love, Archie, is an impractical enterprise. Now, beer. I tugged the bell cord and Fritz appeared, silent as a butler from legend. The tray arrived, silver gleaming. Wolfe poured, the sound crisp in the quiet room. He lifted the glass and looked through it like a magnifier at the forged page. False trails, he said softly. They fascinate me. The labour spent to deceive, when truth requires so little effort. Yeah, I said, but truth doesn't pay $5,000 a month. He grunted, approval maybe, and took a long, contemplative drink. As the clock struck 10:30, I closed my notebook and stretched. You realise, I said, if that page came from Werner's car, somebody knew where to plant it, meaning they were watching her, and maybe us. Wolfe didn't open his eyes. Then let them watch. If they persist, they will learn the price of counterfeiting reality. He raised the glass again. I left him to his philosophy. Outside, Manhattan hummed like a typewriter with no ribbon, plenty of motion, no meaning. But in that office, under the lamplight, the lie was finally showing its smudge. When a dame dies twice in 1 week, first in gossip, then for real, it makes a man reconsider his line of work. The Silver Derby smelled of perfume, whiskey, and police sweat when I got there. The Marquis still blinked like nothing had happened, but backstage, the dressing room door was guarded by a flatfoot with his hand on his holster and his conscience somewhere else. Inside, Verna Dale had traded her platinum sparkle for stillness. She was draped across a velvet chaise, a silk scarf knotted too tightly around her throat. Her mirror reflected everything but her pulse. If corpses were currency, I muttered, we'd all be rich and miserable. Kramer's voice came from behind me. Save the wit, Goodwin. This one's bad enough. He looked worse, tie askew, cigar chewed flat, and the kind of expression you see on men who've stopped counting the dead. She'd been alone maybe 15 minutes, he said. Club pianist heard a thump but figured it was glamour collapsing. Any sign of struggle? He shook his head. No fingerprints, no witnesses, and get this, her jewellery box has been cleaned out except for one earring and a broken cufflink. That got my attention. Cufflink? Yeah. Same design as the one from the canning mess. You know anything about that? I didn't answer, which told him plenty. He scowled. You and Wolfe are playing some angle, and I'm sick of it. Wolfe doesn't play angles, I said. He plays symphonies. Tell him this one's ending in handcuffs if he keeps butting in. Sure, I said. I'll put that right between the orchids and the beer. Kramer growled but didn't bite. He turned to his men. Bag everything. Nobody leaves until I say so. I stepped around Werner's vanity, careful not to smudge the powder scattered like white snow. There it was, a small indentation in the velvet lining of the jewellery case, twin to the one I'd seen at Canning's apartment. The missing cufflink again, a perfect echo of guilt. Whoever was writing this script had a flair for repetition. By the time I left, the club's lights were dimmed and the band's instruments lay silent, their cases open like coffins. Manhattan nightlife has a short memory, but this one would leave a bruise. It was after midnight when I got back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office reading a book on medieval punishments, appropriate choice considering his mood. Report, he said, without looking up. Verna Dale, I said, dead, strangled with her own scarf. Same setup, same neatness, and the kicker, another cufflink gone missing. Either she accessorized her death or someone's staging a sequel. He shut the book and stared at me. Phooey. That's one way to put it. A minute later, the phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice came through, gravel and fury. Put him on. Wolfe took the receiver with a sigh. Yes, Inspector? You said you weren't meddling, Kramer barked. Then why is your man crawling around my crime scene? Mr. Goodwin does not crawl, Wolfe said coldly. He observes. Miss Dale's death is tragic, but not unexpected. Someone grows nervous when truth nears exposure. Don't give me riddles, Kramer snapped. You've been pulling strings and now another body drops. If you know something, talk, or I'll haul you in for obstruction. You will not, Wolfe said, voice soft but deadly. You have neither cause nor courage for that. I will call you tomorrow with facts. Until then, restrain yourself. Kramer made a sound somewhere between a growl and surrender. You'd better, Wolfe. The line went dead. Wolfe set the receiver down carefully. "Imbecile," he muttered, blustering when reflection is required. "Don't be too hard on him," I said. "He's losing corpses faster than reporters lose ethics." He ignored me, gaze distant. "Archie, this second death was unnecessary. Miss Dale was a pawn discarded when her use ended." "Yeah," I said. "She played the wrong hand." He turned, eyes sharp. "Do not attempt gallantry. You are not constructed for martyrdom." I grinned, though it didn't stick. "Maybe not, but I'd like to shake the hand that did this, just long enough to twist it off." He sighed. "Emotion clouds judgment. Tomorrow we resume order. Bring me the files at 10. He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz, beer." I left him to his ritual, the sound of the elevator hum faint through the floorboards. Somewhere uptown, Kramer was still pacing. Somewhere else, a killer was congratulating himself. And me, I was stuck between the two, with nothing but a dead blonde and a missing cufflink to prove the city hadn't gone completely insane. By the time I hit Fifth Avenue the next morning, the fog had given up pretending to be romantic and settled for damp and expensive. The investment firm of Halloran & Chase occupied half a floor in one of those marble towers where money goes to feel safe. Inside, the air smelled of waxed wood and self-respect. The receptionist had the sort of voice that charged rent per syllable. I told her I represented Nero Wolfe on a financial inquiry. That name opens more doors than a locksmith's kit, and 10 minutes later I was in the corner office of Thomas Halloran, brother to Deputy Commissioner Halloran, and as polished as a banker's conscience. He was all cuffs and composure until I mentioned Ralph Canning. Then the shine started to tarnish. "I don't see what interest a private detective could possibly have in our accounts," he said. "Neither do I said, "but Wolfe does, and that's enough for both of us. We've been looking into certain ledgers that show payments marked B17 and RC. Those initials mean anything to you?" He blinked twice. "No, we handle hundreds of accounts." "If sweat were currency," I told him, "you could have bought the stock exchange." He smiled tightly. "Mr. Goodwin, this is a reputable firm. You're implying—" "I'm implying nothing. You're supplying plenty." He rose, walking to the window. "You understand my brother's position. Any hint of scandal would be unfortunate for both of you," I finished, "especially if those payments trace back to a police fund. Wolfe thinks someone used Canning's money to grease a few badges." That got him pacing. His hand twitched each time I said badge. He looked like a man debating whether to open a window or jump through it. I let the silence stretch, then strolled to his desk and flipped my notebook. "There's a pattern," I said. "Each transfer moved through a short-term trust here, yours, before being cashed by shell accounts. One signature keeps repeating, yours." "That's absurd," he said, too quickly. "Not absurd enough to erase," I said. "So why don't we stop rehearsing denials and start the symphony? Wolfe's waiting on the line." I crossed to the desk phone and dialed the brownstone. Wolfe answered after one ring. "Report," he said. "I'm in Halloran & Chase," I said. "Mr. Halloran's sweating through the upholstery. We're discussing family finances." Over the receiver came Wolfe's calm rumble. "Mr. Halloran, good morning. You may find this inconvenient, but I insist. Did your brother ever authorize Mr. Ralph Canning to manage discretionary funds for departmental expenditures?" Halloran stiffened. "Of course not. That's preposterous." "Preposterousness," Wolfe said, "is a poor refuge. The documents suggest otherwise. If you are innocent, you will assist." Halloran's voice rose. "This is an outrage. I'll call my attorney." "You may," Wolfe said. "But first, Mr. Goodwin, ask him whether Sergeant Stebbins was the only officer Canning approached." I repeated the question. Halloran's eyes darted toward the window again, then to me. I don't know anything about Stebbins. I only know that Canning tried to involve certain men, others, but they refused." "Others?" I asked. He swallowed. "My brother said it was handled. He said to let it die." On the line, Wolfe's tone was like a scalpel. "Ah, then rot does run in the family. Thank you, Mr. Halloran. That will suffice for now." The click on the phone sounded like a verdict. Halloran turned to me, pale under the banker tan. "You have no idea what you're meddling in, Goodwin. This city runs on compromises." "Sure," I said, "but sometimes the tab comes due." He sat down hard, hands shaking. I left him staring at his polished desk like it might confess on his behalf. Outside, the air smelled of rain and ink. I phoned Wolfe from the corner booth. "You got your confession?" I said. "Not yet," Wolfe replied. only its shadow. Return at once. We must follow the money and the blood to its next donor. Dinner at the brownstone is the one sacred rite left in modern civilization. Fritz was a bishop in an apron, and Wolfe his most devout parishioner. That evening the candles glowed low, the silver glinted like polite suspicion, and the squab smelled like it had died of contentment. Wolfe sat at the head of the long mahogany table, napkin precise, posture imperial. I was opposite, half listening to the muffled hum of Manhattan outside the curtained windows. Fritz moved like a shadow, silent, devoted, immune to sarcasm. "Squab à la Bressan," he announced softly, setting the plates, "and a 1938 Amontillado." "Exemplary," Wolfe said, as if conferring a title. "Nothing like poultry to pair with conspiracy," I muttered, earning a glare from both of them. Fritz for blasphemy, Wolfe for interruption. We ate in silence for several minutes. For Wolfe, chewing his thought. For me, it's survival. He finally set down his fork, wiped his lips, and leaned back. The look meant the meal had achieved its purpose. Fuel for deduction. "Archie," he said, "Verna Dale was not murdered for what she knew, but for what she might reveal if cornered." "That's a subtle difference," I said. "To her, the result's the same." "Subtlety," he said, "is the distinction between chaos and understanding. Miss Dale's death was containment, not coincidence." I raised my glass. Containment, as in cleaning up the mess after Canning's blackmail career went up in smoke. Pfui. Canning was not blackmailing police officials. He was safeguarding proof of corruption and refused to destroy it when pressed. That made me pause mid-sip. "You mean he was honest?" "Hardly. He was venal," Wolfe said. "But even venality has its thresholds. He profited from secrets. He did not wish to share them. His error was assuming that his possession of evidence made him indispensable. Men of power despise dependents." I chewed thoughtfully. "That narrows it down to only half the department." He frowned. "Your levity is as intrusive as Kramer's cigars." "But twice as fragrant," I said. "And you're implying a senior officer put the squeeze on Canning." "Implying?" Wolfe scoffed. "I am stating." He reached for his glass and sipped, eyes distant. Canning's ledger was not his weapon. It was his insurance. When he refused to destroy the incriminating page, the one we recovered, his confederates silenced him. Miss Dale was then eliminated to erase the intermediary link. "Which link being her knowledge that the ledger existed at all," Wolfe said. "The missing page, later forged, was a diversion. Its crude imitation of Stebbins' number was designed to cripple one honest man and distract from guilt above him." Fritz reappeared to clear the first course. "Will there be dessert, sir?" "No," Wolfe said. "Coffee in the office." Fritz bowed slightly. "At once." When he was gone, I leaned back. "So Canning gets killed because he wouldn't torch the proof, Verna because she handled it, and Stebbins because he's convenient." "Precisely." Wolfe tapped the table once with a finger. "The question remaining is which senior official had access both to Canning's trust accounts and to the internal rosters required to forge Stebbins' identification. That intersection is narrow." "Halloran," I said. "His brother ran the bank. He's got both ends of the rope." Wolfe gave a short nod. "He is the most probable candidate, but probability is not proof." "Tell that to Kramer. He's probably writing Stebbins' eulogy right now." Wolfe's eyes flashed irritation, then softened, almost fondly. "Your loyalty to that obstinate sergeant does you credit, but refrain from melodrama." "I'm not melodramatic," I said. "I'm just tired of good cops taking the fall for bad ones." He exhaled slowly, then regarded me over the rim of his glass. "Mr. Goodwin, you persist in mistaking emotion for motive. It clouds your otherwise serviceable mind." "Thanks," I said. "I'll put that on my resume." He ignored the jab. "At 10 tomorrow, Kramer will come, blustering as usual. You will have ready the photostat of the forged ledger page, the handwriting comparison, and your notes from Halloran's office." I nodded. "And after he storms out?" "After," Wolfe said, "I shall arrange the necessary demonstration. Logic must be dramatized before men of action will heed it." "That's what they said about the crucifixion," I muttered. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Blasphemy and banter, the twin pillars of your endurance. Very well. Fritz entered again with the coffee service, the porcelain gleaming. He poured silently and retreated. Wolfe inhaled the aroma like a priest receiving incense. I shall now, he said, consider the case as I would a meal. One course remaining, but its flavour dependent on the timing of its presentation. I stirred my cup. You're saying we're down to dessert, the sweet taste of justice. Justice, Wolfe said, is rarely sweet. It is merely necessary. That hung in the air like pipe smoke. I broke it with a grin. Still, it goes down easier with coffee. He didn't answer. He was staring at the wall, seeing patterns no sane man would admit to. I knew better than to interrupt when the machinery in his skull was running. After a minute, he said quietly, Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow's confrontation will require precision. I rely on your wit to temper my bluntness. Always happy to be the comic relief? You are more useful than that, he said, surprisingly. You listen when others argue, a rare faculty. I blinked. Coming from Wolfe, that was like a father's embrace and a medal ceremony rolled into one. Don't get sentimental on me, boss. It's bad for your digestion. He looked almost amused. My digestion is unimpeachable. Your jest less so. Fritz reappeared in the doorway. Coffee finished, sir? Wolfe glanced at the clock. Yes, the orchids await. I gathered the plates. Mind if I stay here and type up the day's circus? As long as you do so quietly, Wolfe said, rising with the solemn dignity of a judge closing session. We have much to prepare. Tomorrow, the meal concludes. He left for the elevator, the hum fading upward toward the plant rooms. The house felt still again, all ticking clocks and Manhattan murmurs. I sat at the typewriter, rolled in a sheet, and began. If conspiracy has a scent, it isn't gunpowder or perfume. It's squab and sherry, rich, civilized, and just dangerous enough to choke on. If perspiration could testify under oath, Halloran's would have been convicted before he opened his mouth. The man filled Wolfe's office with the aroma of fear and bay rum, both wilting under the evening heat that Fritz's ventilation couldn't quite chase out. Wolfe sat behind his desk like a granite idol in yellow, hands steepled, eyes half-lidded, while I did my part, circling the room and keeping the prey from bolting. I was told, Halloran said, wiping his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief that had seen better days, that this would be a private consultation, not an ambush. Wolfe inclined his head. If you consider truth an ambush, sir, then yes, I am guilty. Sit down. He didn't so much sit as collapse, sinking into the red chair as though it were a witness box. The shadows from the desk lamp carved him up into nervous sections, forehead, lips, collar, the jitter in his hands. You understand, Wolfe continued, that your brother's firm is implicated in a sequence of transactions, small, discreet, and thoroughly dishonest. The amounts are modest, the implications are not. Mr. Goodwin, the photostats. I handed over the envelope. Halloran's eyes darted at it like a man watching a snake uncoil. Wolfe opened the flap with the care of a priest turning pages of scripture and spread the copies across his blotter. Here we have disbursements from accounts controlled by Ralph Canning, deceased, each signed with initials, each routed through Halloran Investments, each tied to officers of the law, identified only by badge numbers. One, you'll note, corresponds with your brother's office telephone extension. That doesn't prove. Phooey, Wolfe interrupted. It was the sort of phooey that could flatten a parade. Do not insult the intelligence of this household. You will answer only when necessary. I stepped nearer, for effect. He means when you're ready to stop pretending you didn't know Canning was greasing palms to rig the precinct votes. Halloran's hand went to his tie. That's absurd. Indeed, Wolfe said mildly. Then why, Deputy Commissioner, did you mention to Mr. Goodwin that Canning tried to buy Stebbins and others? The recording, Archie. I flipped open the notebook on my knee where a neat transcript waited. My shorthand may not rival Fritz's souffle timing, but it gets the point across. Reading aloud, I reached the choice bit. Stebbins wasn't the only cop Canning tried to buy. End quote. Halloran turned a delicate shade of damp porcelain. I didn't mean... You meant precisely that, Wolfe said. A guilty man's tongue betrays him faster than his pen. Unfortunately for you, Mr. Canning's pen did not rest in his own hand. That one landed. The man's lips parted, but no words came out. His knuckles whitened on the armrest. Wolfe went on, his voice smooth as poured oil. You see, the ledger page you thought destroyed was discovered, in a lady's automobile, no less. Its handwriting is forgery. Canning's signature was simulated by one who used violet ink, uncommon among men but fashionable among women of questionable taste. That, however, is secondary. The salient fact is this: you, or your brother's firm, continued to process the payments even after Canning ceased drawing breath. Why? Halloran's breath rattled. We didn't know he was dead. The instructions— He stopped himself, realizing he'd walked onto a trap door. The instructions, Wolfe echoed softly, came from whom? He hesitated. The clock ticked. The room held its breath. Finally, he blurted, "From the mayor's liaison office. They said to keep the books balanced until further notice. I swear I didn't." Wolfe raised a finger. "Enough. The verb swear is tedious. You have confirmed sufficient for now." I grinned. "You realize, Commissioner, you just handed Kramer a Christmas present wrapped in red tape." Halloran turned on me, desperate. "Goodwin, for God's sake, you think I'd murder Canning over that? He was a pest, sure, but killing him, no. Someone higher up decided he knew too much. You've got to believe—" "I don't got to believe anything," I said. "I just take notes." He rose halfway, but Wolfe's tone froze him. "Sit. You are alive because others are cautious, not because you are innocent. Mr. Goodwin will escort you out presently. You will tell Inspector Kramer you have nothing further to add. Yet. Do I make myself clear?" Halloran swallowed and nodded. I moved to the door, hand hovering near his elbow like I was guiding a nervous horse. He muttered something that rhymed with damnation as he went down the hall, leaving behind the ghost of cigar ash and guilt. When the door closed, I turned back. Wolfe hadn't moved. The lamplight burnished his face, but his eyes were distant, fixed on some pattern only he could see. "Well," I said, "if sweat were currency, Halloran could have bought the stock exchange." Wolfe didn't smile, but the corners of his mouth acknowledged the attempt. "It is gratifying when folly produces dividends, though," he added, "I suspect we have not yet reached the profit." "Meaning what?" "We've got the motive. Canning blackmailing cops, Werner helping, Halloran laundering. All that's left is who tightened the scarf." He drew a slow breath, fingers pressing together. "Yes, the scarf." His gaze drifted toward the orchid schedule on the wall. "Archie, I find myself troubled. The hand that killed Werner Dale possessed strength enough for violence, but patience enough for art. That combination," he said quietly, "belongs neither to Halloran nor to chance." I frowned. "Then who—" He leaned back, voice almost tender. "Someone who understands both restraint and display. Someone, I fear, who has not yet finished the arrangement." The phone rang then, shrill, urgent, slicing through the thick air. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Answer it, Archie. And prepare yourself. The caller will tell us where the next body lies. When Wolfe freezes mid-beer, expect fireworks. I've seen him stop a sentence, an insult, or a fee negotiation, but never that sacred motion between bottle and glass." At 11:15, the brownstone was quiet enough to hear Fritz polishing silver in the kitchen, and Wolfe sat staring at his untouched beer like it had turned philosopher. I leaned back in my chair. "What's the matter? Warm bottle? Fritz shorted you on the chill." He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed somewhere above the rim of the glass, as though the answer to 2 murders hovered in the steam of the lamp. Then he said, almost to himself, "Phooey, I have been an imbecile." "That's news," I said. "Hold the presses." His eyes shifted toward me. "Archie, the cigars." "Plural?" "Yes, 2 unlit cigars, one crushed under a wheel, one on a vanity table beside a corpse. You observed both?" "Sure. I didn't think the city's smoking ban had gone homicidal." He drew in a breath that inflated him like a slow balloon. They were not tokens of habit, but of hypocrisy. A gesture, silent, accusatory. The killer approached them. I frowned. "You're saying we've got a moralist who carries around cigars as calling cards?" "A moralist or a zealot," he said. "Both are lethal in their righteousness." He pushed back from the desk, which for Wolfe qualifies as a stampede. "Fetch the inventory from Inspector Kramer, the personal effects of Mr. Canning." "Kramer'll love that call. At this hour, he's probably sleeping with his cigar still lit. Wake him, Wolfe said. Inform him that my beer is hostage to justice. He will understand. I grinned. If I tell him that, he'll send a squad car just to confiscate the glass. But he was already reaching for a notepad, his fountain pen gliding like a scalpel. We require confirmation. The cigars were unlit because both victims were subdued before smoke could rise. The chloroform trace, the upholstery in Canning's car, the gloves of Miss Dale, identical. Mr. Pantzer must test and confirm. I dialed Saul. He answers quicker than a conscience. Pantzer, he said, sleep in his voice, but curiosity right behind it. Saul, sorry to ruin your beauty rest, I told him. Wolfe wants to know if your nose still works. A pause, then, I'll bite. Check Verna Dale's gloves, the ones the police bagged. Wolfe thinks they smell like Canning's car seat. Chloroform? That's the hunch. If you pass out halfway through, we'll know he's right. He chuckled. Give me an hour. I hung up and turned back to the desk. Wolfe was studying the condensation on the beer bottle the way astronomers study comets. Archie, he murmured, how does a policeman justify crime? How does one balance the scales when justice and fraternity are opposed? Usually with paperwork, I said. He ignored me, which meant he was winding the spring. A cop's conscience is a delicate organ. When corrupted, it must either harden or explode. I fear ours has exploded, and the debris is human. I nodded slowly. So, you're thinking Stebbins' refusal to play ball made him a target for whoever wanted a clean department, on paper anyway. Precisely, Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The true criminal requires camouflage. He hides in virtue. Someone has sought to frame the blameless, to bury guilt beneath integrity's corpse. Meaning, I said, our murderer's a reformer with blood on his hands. He gave me a small nod, approval in Wolfian currency. You perceive the outline. The phone rang. I caught it before the second ring. Goodwin. Saul's voice came sharp and satisfied. Confirmed. Same compound, chloroform, faint traces mixed with cigar oil. Somebody dipped the ends, probably to mask the scent. Saul's voice came sharp and satisfied. Confirmed. Same compound, chloroform, faint traces mixed with cigar oil. Somebody dipped the ends, probably to mask the scent. He added. Had a friendly tech at the lab crack the seal while I watched. Chain of custody intact. I whistled. That's classy. A knockout and a cover story in one puff. Also, Saul added, the gloves were expensive. Custom pair, monogram gone, probably torn off. Somebody wanted them back. Thanks, pal. I hung up. He's right. Same juice in both murders. Whoever did it carried their ethics in a vial. Wolfe exhaled through his nose. Then the circle tightens. The unlit cigar becomes a symbol. A policeman's vice denied him by his conscience. It was placed deliberately. Our killer weaponized morality. Which makes him dangerous, I said. Any guy who kills for virtue's liable to start collecting saints. He permitted himself a glance toward me, part amusement, part warning. You are glib, but not entirely witless. Now record this. I took out my notebook. He dictated in that slow, sonorous rhythm that made the typewriter jealous. Subject: identity of murderer, likely connected to police hierarchy. Psychological profile: ascetic, self-righteous, familiar with internal discipline procedures. Method: chloroform and manual strangulation. Motive: moral retribution cloaked as reform. When he stopped, the clock on the mantel said midnight. Fritz's footsteps came and went in the hall, discreet as a waiter in confession. Want me to type that up? I asked. No, we shall wait for confirmation from Inspector Kramer. He lifted the beer again, and this time the glass made it halfway. Then it paused once more. Not again, I groaned. What now? His eyes had the distant gleam of a man catching a constellation. Archie. The cigars were unlit, yes, but both victims handled them. The killer offered them the choice, the illusion of will, a perverse ritual of consent. I blinked. You mean he handed them a cigar and rendered them unconscious as they accepted? Wolfe finished. An execution disguised as temptation. I let out a low whistle. That's poetic in a sick way. The murderer preaches restraint by handing out cigars he never lets them light. He nodded once. Vice's sermon. Then softly, "And who among our suspects moralizes thus? Who sermonizes against indulgence yet frequents dens of it for supervision?" "Halloran," I said, "the deputy with the clean-living speeches and the sweaty conscience." "Perhaps," Wolfe murmured, "but he lacks the artistry. No, this belongs to a man who abhors corruption not for the law's sake, but for his own reflection." He finally lifted the glass and drank. The sound of it hitting the desk had the punctuation of a verdict. "So," I said, "who fits the bill?" He leaned back, eyes half closed. "Archie, do you recall which officer arranged the security detail for Canning's fundraiser?" "Yeah, Lieutenant." I stopped. "Oh, hell." Wolfe's smile was faint and fatal. "Yes, Lieutenant Jerome Nash. The same who testified to seeing Stebbins near the diner that night. The same who swore he despised cigars." A chill tickled the back of my neck. "And the same man who preached discipline in every precinct meeting." Wolfe set down the empty glass. "Tomorrow we shall invite him here, but not before orchids. One must not interrogate on an empty intellect." I grinned despite the crawl in my spine. "Fine by me. I'll have the cuffs polished." "Do," he said quietly. "For Mr. Nash, or for our consciences. I am not yet certain which will require restraint." By mid-morning the sermon pointed to Nash, but the paper trail refused him communion. Saul came back with the requisition log, a duplicate key for Stebbins' squad car signed out last week, by Sergeant Ed Rusk. Pantzer's smudge test on the crushed cigar matched Rusk's brand and cut, not Nash's. Records showed Rusk on and off the East Side house at the exact window the car was moved. Nash's alibi, miserable though it was, still held by 10 minutes. Wolfe pinched his lips, restacked the photostats, and altered the summons. "Not Nash," he said. "Rusk. Invite him, and bring Kramer." By the time Inspector Kramer lumbered through the office door, the air was already at full voltage. Wolfe sat in his yellow chair, broad and still as a monument, and I stood by the globe with the satisfaction of a man who knows the fuse is lit. Pearly Stebbins hovered near the bookshelves, looking like a gorilla forced into Sunday clothes, and the last guest of honor, Sergeant Ed Rusk, sat in the red chair. Nash had fit the sermon, but the keys, the timing, and the ash all rhymed with Rusk. He was sweating like a man who'd lost every excuse he'd ever rehearsed. Kramer's cigar shot smoke like a cannon. "All right, Wolfe," he growled. "You said you've got something that'll clear Stebbins and nail whoever's playing butcher. You'd better have it." "I do," Wolfe said, "and I would prefer that you refrain from reducing the air quality further." Kramer grunted but pocketed the cigar. "Fine. Talk." Wolfe's eyes moved slowly across the room, pausing on Rusk. "The human soul, Inspector, when cloaked in a uniform, too often mistakes authority for absolution. That misconception has murdered 2 people. Rusk twitched. "Now hold on." "Silence," Wolfe commanded. He didn't raise his voice, but the word carried the weight of a subpoena. "Mr. Goodwin, the photostats." I laid the packet on Wolfe's desk. He opened it and spread the pages like a dealer turning aces. "These gentlemen show the ledger of payments handled by Canning, a political fixer of the dirtiest variety. He bribed policemen to manipulate precinct elections. When one of his pawns, Deputy Commissioner Halloran, faced exposure, Canning became a liability. Someone acted to remove him." Rusk's jaw tightened. "You're saying I am saying nothing yet," Wolfe interrupted. "Let us examine the facts. At approximately 2:10 a.m., Ralph Canning's body was found in the back of Pearly Stebbins' squad car. The engine was running. The car had been moved from the station garage without Stebbins' knowledge. No wounds, no gun, no struggle. Only a faint odor of chloroform." Kramer nodded. "That much we know." "Indeed. Yet the car key was recovered from Stebbins' desk drawer, where it had remained since the previous evening. Therefore, whoever moved the vehicle possessed a duplicate key or access through Stebbins' locker, which was unforced but unlocked." Pearly's face darkened. "I didn't. I know you didn't," Wolfe said sharply, cutting him off with unexpected warmth. "Your integrity, though cumbersome, is genuine. Someone exploited it." I added, "and that someone knew Pearly's habits, when he smoked, where he parked, and how he left his keys." Wolfe nodded. "Precisely. Enter Sergeant Edward Rusk, Stebbins' partner for 8 years, trusted, competent, and conveniently on record as leaving early the night of the murder to check a lead. At that very hour, witnesses place a man of his build near the Harlem diner where the car was discovered. Rusk's mouth opened, but Wolfe continued without pause. When questioned later, Rusk claimed he was at the East Side precinct, a solid alibi, except the time he gave contradicts the forensic sequence of the cigar stub crushed beneath the car's rear wheel. That got Kramer's attention. Cigar stub? I pointed to the evidence photo on Wolfe's blotter. We had Saul Panzer check it. The ash was fresh, not more than 20 minutes old when the car was found. Stebbins never got near it, but Rusk smokes the same brand. Lucky Strike Corona, unfiltered. Pearlie shot Rusk a glare that could have melted brass. You lousy. Control yourself, Wolfe said. This is not yet catharsis. Sergeant Rusk placed that cigar deliberately, intending it as a red herring to connect Stebbins to the scene. He knew Stebbins would be the first to suffer, too proud to plead, too honest to scheme. Rusk barked. You can't prove I took the car. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. I drew out a folded page from my pocket and handed it over. Maybe not the car, I said, but you signed for the duplicate key last week, remember? The station requisition log doesn't lie. Kramer stepped closer, reading the copy. His jaw set. That's your handwriting, Rusk. Rusk swallowed. There was a mix-up. There was, Wolfe agreed. You mixed conscience with convenience and produced calamity. You used chloroform from the property locker, subdued Canning in his car, and left him in Stebbins's vehicle to rot both reputations at once. The cufflink, missing from Canning's sleeve, was planted later in Verna Dale's dressing room to divert suspicion toward her. When she realized the game and threatened exposure, you strangled her, again, with chloroform preceding the act, efficient, cowardly. The silence that followed could have carved marble. Rusk's face turned a dangerous shade halfway between denial and collapse. Kramer broke it first. You're saying he did it to protect Halloran, to bury the ledger? Yes, Wolfe said. Rusk was Halloran's man, feeding him information, receiving money from the same fund. Halloran's disgrace would end the arrangement. Rusk acted to preserve the illusion of order, to kill for loyalty. A pitiable paradox. I couldn't resist. Betrayal in blue has a ring to it. Rusk lunged up. You're twisting everything. Kramer's hand was faster, gripping his shoulder. Sit down, Rusk. You've twisted enough. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. Inspector, the evidence suffices. The sequence of timing, the cigar stub, the duplicate key, the ledger payments, all converge. If you desire a confession, I suggest your own methods. I will not sully my carpet with them. Rusk sagged, his voice cracking. I didn't mean for Verna to die. She panicked. I had to. That's enough, Kramer snapped. He turned toward Wolfe, expression carved from grudging respect. You'll get your name in the papers again. You know I hate that. I detest it equally, Wolfe said, but sometimes illumination demands spectacle. He pressed the bell cord. Fritz appeared silently in the doorway, eyes widening at the tableau. Fritz, Wolfe said, call a taxi for Inspector Kramer and his prisoner, and bring beer. This discussion has impaired my hydration. Rusk stared at the floor, cuffed and trembling. Pearlie stood over him, fists tight, then looked at Wolfe. Thanks, he muttered gruffly, for clearing my name. Wolfe inclined his head. Mr. Stebbins, your temper is a liability, but your conscience is rare. Guard it. Others have weaponized theirs. Pearlie nodded, eyes wet but defiant, and followed Kramer out with Rusk between them. The door shut. Silence settled like dust after gunfire. I exhaled. Well, I said. Rusk looked ready to melt into the rug. Even Fritz would have refused to clean up. Wolfe's lips curved. A vulgar image, but apt. I dropped into my chair. That makes 2 corpses, 1 tarnished commissioner, and a cop headed for Sing Sing, all in a week's work. He lifted his beer, finally tasting victory. Justice, Mr. Goodwin, he said, is seldom swift, never cheap, and always indigestible. Then I'll order milk, I said. It's easier on the stomach. He grunted, a sound somewhere between exasperation and affection. Confound it, Archie. If you ever apply yourself fully, you might yet learn subtlety. Don't ruin me now, I said. I've got a reputation for blunt instruments. Wolfe closed his eyes, content. So you have. And for tonight, Bluntness has served admirably. It was close to 10 when Kramer came back. The air in Wolfe's office still carried the ghost of Rusk's confession, the way a theatre smells of smoke after the curtain falls. Fritz had already retreated, and Wolfe was behind his desk again, as if order could be restored by the simple act of sitting. Kramer stood in the doorway a full 5 seconds before he moved, his hat in one hand, the other gripping the brim hard enough to leave marks. "Rusk's on his way downtown," he said. "He cracked before we hit the curb. The lab matched his prints to the chloroform bottle in Verna Dale's dressing room." Wolfe inclined his head, as I predicted. "Yeah," Kramer said flatly. "As you predicted." He stepped farther in, his shoulders making the room look smaller. "I'll file it as clean as it can be. Stebbins gets reinstated. The commissioner's office will eat crow. You've just made my week hell." "That was not my intention." "Sure it wasn't." He set his hat down on the corner of the desk, a move so foreign I nearly applauded. "I don't hand out thanks easy, Wolfe, but you saved one of my men. Pearlie's rough, but he's straight. That counts." Wolfe nodded once, slow and dignified. "Then we are even, Inspector. You have spared me more than once the indignity of official interference." Kramer gave a small snort that might have been a laugh if it weren't so tired. "Don't push it. You've still got half the department grumbling that you do our job from an armchair." Wolfe's mouth twitched. "Then they should invest in better chairs." That got the ghost of a grin from me, and even Kramer's eyebrows twitched north before he reined them in. He glanced at the half-empty beer glass by Wolfe's hand. "You never change, do you?" "Evolution," Wolfe replied, "is for those dissatisfied with perfection." Kramer shook his head. "I'll have to quote that next time the commissioner asks why I tolerate you." "You needn't explain tolerance," Wolfe said. "Competence is its own defense." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind that comes when two prize-fighters recognize the same bruise. I leaned against the globe, studying Kramer's jaw, working over something that wasn't tobacco for once. He was a man built for anger, not gratitude, and right then he was trying to make room for both. Finally, he reached for his hat. "All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your written statement. And—" He stopped himself, then forced it out. "Good work." Wolfe inclined his head again, almost a bow. "You honor me, Inspector." Kramer rolled the brim between his fingers. "Don't get used to it." He turned to the door, then paused. "Tell Stebbins I said the beer's on him." "I will," I said. "Though you'd better warn him to bring cash. Wolfe's idea of beer doesn't come from a corner tavern." Kramer grunted, opened the door, and left. His footsteps faded down the hall, and the brownstone settled back into its usual hush. I looked over at Wolfe, who hadn't moved. "If Kramer ever hugged you," I said, "the world might have ended." Wolfe's eyes stayed on the beer glass. "Humanity endures only because it refrains from such vulgar demonstrations." "Still," I said, "you've got to admit it. He respects you." "Respect," Wolfe murmured, "is a species of fear tempered by gratitude. I accept it conditionally." I grinned. "You're welcome too, by the way." He finally looked at me, one eyebrow lifting. "Mr. Goodwin, your contributions were noted. Now fetch another beer. Integrity may be nourishing, but it leaves the throat intolerably dry." I headed for the kitchen, thinking that for once victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like quiet, honest relief. When Pearlie Stebbins rang the bell that evening, the sound had a different note. Not the dull clang of official trouble, but something almost sheepish. I opened the door and found him there in his best suit, which meant it had probably been pressed by a tire iron, holding an envelope like it might explode. "Evening, Goodwin," he muttered. "Wolfe in?" "He's seated where God and furniture intended," I said. "Come in before Fritz mistakes you for a delivery." Stebbins shuffled in, wiping his palms on the brim of his hat. The office light was soft, amber from the desk lamp, and Wolfe sat planted behind it like the Emperor of Reason, a book closed at his elbow. When he saw Pearlie, his brows rose a millimetre. "Sergeant?" "Inspector again," Stebbins corrected, trying not to grin. "As of this morning." "Ah," Wolfe extended a hand, not for greeting but for the envelope. "And our arrangement?" Pearlie passed it over. "That's the full fee, plus, there's a little extra." Wolfe slid out the bills with thumb and forefinger, counting once, twice, then replacing them neatly. "Indeed. Inspector Kramer's contribution, I presume." Stebbins' ears went red. "Kramer, Didn't want me to mention it. I just did, Wolfe said, tucking the envelope into a drawer. Tell him I decline interest. Justice should not accrue compound benefits. I couldn't resist. You mean you're turning down extra cash? Hold the presses. I want a photo of this. Wolfe's eyes cut toward me like twin scalpels. Spare me your journalistic impulses, Archie. My satisfaction lies in equilibrium restored. Sure, I said. Equilibrium and a fat envelope. Phooey, Wolfe said, but there was a softness to it, like the steam off Fritz's soup. Stebbins cleared his throat. Look, I owe you both. You didn't have to take it personal. Most fellas would have let me swing. Wolfe leaned back, his fingertips forming their cathedral arch. You are a man of limited finesse but notable fortitude. Those are rarities in any profession. Pearlie blinked. If that's a compliment, thanks. It is a statement, Wolfe said. Compliments are superfluous. That earned me a grin from Pearlie, who turned to me. And you, Goodwin, you had my back out there. Guess I misjudged you. Don't worry, I said. It's a common mistake. Fritz appeared at the doorway with his usual timing, 2 chilled glasses and a tray of beer. Wolfe nodded to him like a monarch granting audience, and Fritz vanished again, silent as smoke. Wolfe lifted his glass halfway, then paused. To the proper alignment of cause and consequence, he intoned. Stebbins raised an imaginary one. I'll drink to that, and to not seeing my name in the Gazette for once. I clinked my own against Wolfe's. And to miracles. Wolfe satisfied, Kramer civil, and Stebbins solvent. I'm switching to milk before the sky falls. Wolfe gave a disdainful sniff. Spare me your dairy symbolism, Archie. Justice, when achieved, has its own flavour. Robust, slightly bitter, but restorative. Like your beer, I said. Precisely. Pearlie chuckled, the sound rusty but genuine. You two ought to take this act on the road. Impossible, Wolfe murmured. I do not travel. That drew my last laugh for the night. Pearlie left soon after, lighter by one envelope and heavier by one reputation. The door clicked behind him, and silence settled like a well-folded napkin. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, content at last. The orchids upstairs would be breathing their fragrance into the air. The world, for the moment, balanced again. I finished my beer, then poured myself a glass of milk to mark the miracle.